Following 73-day sabbatical that I endured at the Zimbabwe Marari remand prison, I'm back at work and we are doing this like we're doing it for TV. Welcome to The Situation right now, and I'm your host as usual, Dara B, and I want to thank you for all your support that you gave me during the 73-day stint where I learned a lot in prison. But as I got out, the institution of higher learning, the center, the cracks, the UZ was burning. It is still burning. Lectures are not happening. The lecturers, they have downed tools because they are working, they can't feed their families. They are working and they are not getting a commensurate salary in terms of the quality of work that they are expected to do and the quality of products that they are supposed to produce from Chikomo Pleasure, Mount Pleasant's UZ. And for us to discuss this problem that threatens the future of over 4,000 students who are at the university, I have the representative of the lecturers, none other than Minyara Zigwisai. Thank you very much for joining me here on The Situation right now.
Thank you, Blessed, Darabi, and welcome very much, Jima Muriko Kunechimwe Chikomoko. So it's good that we can proceed, and it's good to have you as our student in a lecture that is practical.
No, thank you. Now, I just want us to get straight to it. Komagwisai, what is the crisis that has forced lecturers to down tools? Because I know you've been earning these salaries for quite a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And what broke the camel's back right now?
Yeah, no, thank you. Just to also put into context, I am the legal advisor to the Association of University Teachers of the University of Zimbabwe. So I'm a member of the executive, but I'm their legal advisor, as well as a lecturer at the Faculty of Law. Now, eventually, like you say, it's simply a crisis of survival, a crisis of workers simply saying that enough is enough. We have families to feed. We have children to send to school. We are producing a service for the university as well as for the nation. And they've cried for long enough, like you say, 7 years. And this particular dispute in the last 2 years that they have been crying to say that they can no longer survive and that their dignity as human beings, their dignity as workers has completely been taken apart. So for those reasons, eventually, and after trying all possible means that are possible under the law. So it's not like they were sitting back. They have been, they've tried dialogue with the university authorities. They wrote 27 letters. They only got response to 2 of them. They went to parliament. They petitioned. The Minister of Higher Education then said, deal with the university. Eventually, they went to the courts in May 2023. Again, nothing was happening. So eventually they then realized that at the end of the day, the only way for them to be listened to is to withdraw their labor. And that's what they did. Effectively, the problem is that lecturers were earning, a junior lecturer was earning an income, a gross income of 2,250 in October 2018, February 2019. That salary has been eroded to today to less than $250 and something like 5,000 ZiG. So a total decimation, decapitation of the salaries of lecturers as well as general university staff.
Mm. So you've been speaking to the university leadership, and is it that they don't want to listen or they don't have the resources?
Well, if they had at least shown empathy and understanding, you know, it could have been somewhere. As I've already reflected to you that in a period of 27 letters, they only responded twice. And the AUT executive has only met the university leadership, I think, twice. And only after they had already gone to a labor officer for conciliation. So at a level of leadership at the university level, the university administration has not shown sufficient leadership as head of the institution to bring this matter to the highlight that it requires. But at the same time, they throw the back between each other. The Supreme Court has ruled that what is called the de jure or legal employer is the university, but the actual employer, the de facto paymaster, is the government. So this is a responsibility both of the university administration as well as the government. They are both responsible. The obligation to provide education to all children of Zimbabwe up to tertiary level is a constitutional obligation on the state. So the state is the primary funder. The state has abdicated its duty. The university administration, in terms of the few resources that are available, has also clearly decided to look only after a tiny portion of senior management, as well as spending the liquid resources that are available on luxury projects like a new fence, planting lawns, and such other things. So there is a failure of leadership at the university level as well as the national level.
Let's look at this failure of leadership that you speak of. I've heard the university leadership argue that the fees that are paid by students is just too little to be able to fund the demands of the lecturers.
Yes, and I think there was a statement issued by the registrar of the university, Dr. Madambi, stating that the AUT has said that fees must be increased. As it is, university lecturers cannot even pay for their own children to come to the University of Zimbabwe. At a salary of $230, the fees are over $500, which is a sum that might be paid at a mission school. But how deplorable the situation is that the lecturers themselves and other university staff cannot pay. There was a time when they were allowed to bring up to 3 children paid for by the university, as part of their benefits. That has basically been removed. But it goes back to...
So you're basically saying that you as Mnyala Dzikisai, you can't bring your child at the University of Zimbabwe and pay for, you can't afford that.
Yes, we can't. How can you, when you're paid $230, that amount is not enough to pay for a cottage in Mauberine, in Maubra, just for accommodation. You have not talked about transport, you have not talked about food. So clearly, it is a completely untenable situation. But you must also take into account the fact that university education, right from colonial times to post-independence, has never been paid for primarily by parents. When we went to university in the late 80s and when we graduated, not only were our fees paid for by the state, but we even got a living allowance. If you go across the border in Namibia, in South Africa, that is the situation. The reality, therefore, being that in a society that cares for its people, and in particular in terms of our own current constitution, the obligation to pay for university education is a state national responsibility. So, but because the government, under the current ruling party, both under the Mnangagwa regime, as well as the Mugabe administration, have adopted extreme free market policies called neoliberalism, working together with the IMF and the World Bank. They have sought to remove this responsibility of the state, its core responsibility in education, in health, and then place that burden on ordinary villagers, on ordinary workers. If that had been the case in the 80s, 90% of the professors we have at this university and in other universities in this country and also in the region would never have gone to university. So we do not, it is not possible for ordinary workers. Civil servants are also earning the same amounts. Teachers, $200, nurses, $200. So how do you then increase the fees to fund a university? The funding of a university is a national responsibility that this government and the ruling party have failed.
Some people would argue that people want to complain about paying for serious things like education, yet they're lavishly spending on cars and stuff like that. But when it comes to paying for things that are very important, they want to delegate that to government.
Yes, but as I've said, parents have picked the baton of educating our children in primary school, in secondary school. The to train your skilled manpower at university level and at college level is, as I've said, a societal responsibility. That is a phenomena that is global, not just in the advanced capitalist countries. I've already given you examples here in Africa, here in SADC. And the people who are spending lavishly on cars are certainly not your nurses. They are not certainly your teachers. They are not certainly your ordinary workers. It is tenderpreneurs who have not worked a day in their life, but are looting from state resources and flaunting this wealth. If for a moment these tenderpreneurs were to take just a tenth of what they are flaunting and invest and make proper donations to our universities, to our health system, you would have that kind of funding. So you cannot throw back the burden on just not just university lecturers, but workers of this country who, after 2019, from February, have had their salaries and their wages virtually stolen through legal theft under what was called the Transitional Stabilization Program when this new regime went into power. So you can't keep on insisting that people from whom much has been stolen are then expected to continue carrying this burden.
Minister Mthuli has argued that the fiscal space for government is very tight and is unable to fund these needs. So what needs to be done? Do you believe that the fiscal space is tight?
Well, you've just heard currently that in the last quarter, Zimra has surpassed its revenue targets. In the last 2-3 years, the exports of gold that this country has made have reached record levels. The export revenues of Zimbabwe in the last 2 years are the highest ever in the history of this country. So indeed, when you see these tenderpreneurs who are flashing money around and so forth and all these things, you'd have been with some of them in college, in the other college that you were in, you then know that there's real money in this country. You just have to go into the northern suburbs of Harare, where the rich and the elite live, and you see the mansions that they are building. You look at the cars, you look at the schools that they send their children. No, there is real money. And for Minister Mthuli to say there is no fiscal space is actually a gross-scale exaggeration, if not lie. When he assumed office in 2018, government revenue that was spent on salaries was at 90%. So which meant that only 10% was left for other government expenditures. But as a result of the manipulation of the currency that happened in February 2019, what is called the SI 33 of 2019, when the Zimbabwe dollar was introduced, so-called on a one-to-one basis. And when worker salaries, including the lecturer salaries, which were 2,250 in October 2018, as a result of that currency manipulation and conversion, it then became 2,250 Zimbabwe dollars on a one-to-one level. But obviously, the real issue was that given the sharp depreciation of the Zimbabwe dollar in less than a year, that $2,250 for a lecturer was now worth less than $300. A teacher who was earning $540, their salary was worth less than $35. And the government contribution to revenue from 90%, as I said in 2018, had actually reduced to less than 35% by 2022-2023. So there is huge, and that is the space, and those are the funds that have been used to fund the luxury, unnecessary spendings that are done at a national level, but which are also copied at local levels, like the University of Zimbabwe. You are the University of Zimbabwe. You see that at lecture theaters like Lecture Theatre 400, Diamond. The Diamond Lecture Theatre is less than 5 years. But just last year, they removed the seats, they removed the tiles, retiled it, put in new seats just for a one-day SADC lecture. They've equally done the same thing at LT 400. But instead of spending on the people who really matter, and the people who really matter and produce are the workers at the university, but they ignore them and do these infrastructural projects because it is that which then allows them to get tenders from which they are then able to become fat cats at the expense of workers.
You also mentioned that you accused the management for taking care of a few. Let's talk about these few. Who are these few who are being taken care of?
Yeah, senior management, as we speak right now, we have a situation where lecturers, as I say, are earning paltry sums of net about $230. But if you take your deans, your deputy deans, your senior managements, registrars, right up to the vice chancellor themselves, they get monthly allowances that go upwards of what we understand, in terms of what we've been advised by the AUT executive, that go upwards of $2,500. So if you take your senior management, that is your deans and your directors and so forth, so a small portion of probably less than 100, 150 persons at the university are getting these monthly allowances, whilst lecturers have to fund their own transport from the paltry 230 that they get. These senior managers are getting university cars. Just last year, they got replacements of end of last year, luxury SUV vehicles, which are fully fueled by the university, fully serviced by the university. They get these monthly allowances that I've referred to. That is what is open. That is what we know. But as we've already said, we can see clearly these unnecessary infrastructure expenses, which are obviously likely again to be a source of indirect financing for the senior management. And whilst they're doing that, a lecturer, the university now, in terms of communication, in terms of lecturing, and so we have to use, we're online. But not a single lecturer is given a laptop. Even a cell phone. They're expected to use their laptops, their cell phones, their data to do university business. So not only has there been theft of lecturers' salaries and university workers' salaries, but even the little that they are left with, they're expected to actually do the employer's business using their personal property without compensation or without consent. Things cannot get worse than that.
ZANU-PF, that's a ruling party, is built on Gutsari. Does this permeate to today's livelihoods of the people, in your view, given these discrepancies that you're talking about?
Well, clearly, I think the university lecturer strike has thrown light on the situation of the working class in this country. As I've said, so it's not really peculiar. Traditionally, university lecturers are actually middle classes, in this country, regionally and globally. And at a salary of $2,250, it would have put them in the middle classes. But if you want to see the extent of crisis and failure of the ZANU-PF administration, it is seen in that persons who were middle classes, like lecturers, are now earning a salary that is less than 50% of the poverty datum line. The poverty datum line in this country is $650 a month. That's just really for a worker just to survive with a family of 2 kids and, a spouse, just to survive barely above poverty, not to be considered destitute. The constitution of this country actually says that every worker is entitled to a fair and reasonable wage. Yes. And the Supreme Court has ruled that that means a worker must not be paid a salary that makes them live in destitution. Now, you have employees who just as late as 2019 were in the middle class segment, are now earning a salary that is 50% less than the poverty datum line. So you cannot talk of Gutsari in that. Gutsari represented the aspirations of black workers, peasants, the millions, the vast majority of our society, for a life of dignity, for a life in which the resources of our society, the product of their labor, were equitably shared to ensure that everyone in this country would be able to live a decent life, children able to go to schools with teachers who are paid adequately. You're able to go to hospital where there are drugs, where there are nurses, where there are doctors, and at the top level, you can get top skills at the university and so forth. Clearly, this is the reverse. It was an equitable sharing of our resources. So that is the aspirations that drove the liberation struggle, and that were maintained in the first few years of independence. But what we have had now, starting with ISAP in the 90s, but moving to extreme levels with the coming in of the Mnangagwa administration after the coup in November 2017, is a resort to extreme free market policies. They are called neoliberalism, which are just there for a tiny elite in society to benefit at the expense of the majority. So you must understand that behind the coup in November 2017 was also an ideological drive towards adoption of what I've called free market capitalist policies that care only for the profit of big business.
But if we talk about the free market, wouldn't it be fair that if we had a free market, we'd have money in our pockets because there'll be exchange of goods and services and money, but we don't. So what's the problem?
Well, the extreme free market is that on the one hand, you allow the big businesses, the big capitalists to do as they wish. You deregulate labor laws, for instance, to remove protection of workers from unfair dismissal, from retrenchments. You allow employers to turn workers from permanent workers to become casual contract workers. So if you take the University of Zimbabwe, out of its 1,200 academic staff, nearly 700 are on fixed-term contracts. They're not permanent. When I started teaching in 1994, well over 95% of lecturers would have been permanent. But today now, the opposite is the reversal. So free market policies mean that the rich, the elites, are allowed to, banks are allowed to speculate, but you then leave open. Free market policies also means that the subsidies that the state puts in education, in health, in rural development, all those are removed in order to ensure that the poor, the rich live at the expense of the poor. You know, a good song by Leonard Dembo called Chinyemu. He says, "Kwite kutora kwantiri mushandi muchipa kune anazo." So that is what free market economics does. And at a global level, it has happened. And in this country, in particular after the 2017 coup, those are the policies that we have. So any society must ultimately be able to ensure that every member of that society is able to live a decent, dignified life. And that is a collective responsibility. Muchiwano, there's a saying, whereas free market policies just leave the tiny elite in business and in government enjoying the wealth of society at the expense of everyone. And these are, and we've seen revolts against this in Zimbabwe. You saw revolts in Kenya just a year or two ago, in Bangladesh and so forth. Because if you leave the ordinary people with nothing, eventually they will be left with nothing to eat other than the rich people themselves.
Let's talk about the quality of education that's going to be delivered. Many are worried that this poor payment of lecturers, one has seen an exodus of experienced staff, and also that the ultimate education that is delivered is not up to standard because the lecturers themselves are not fully committed. Is this what you're saying?
Oh yeah, in fact, as a result, you talked about the last 7 years. What has been happening is there's been an exodus, a huge exodus of experienced university lecturers from the University of Zimbabwe and other universities. The new Minister of Higher Education, Dr. Shava, has acknowledged the same. But this situation now is the last straw. So the few who have remained with a deep sense of duty to the nation, people like, if you look at the faculty of law, where I'm from, people like myself have served for over 30 years teaching at the university, out of a sense of duty, commitment, and love for our students, and a couple of my colleagues at the Faculty of Law, and you do that, you have the same thing in a few other faculties. But this is the last straw. And the level of leadership failure that I was referring to, just over this weekend, the university administration has put adverts for replacement of striking lecturers. And contrary to what the university administration has been claiming, that it's business as usual at the university, if you look at the adverts that they've put, they cover every faculty, every department. They seek to recruit hundreds of lecturers in every faculty. That just shows you how widespread and effective this strike has been.
Is it easy to replace a university lecturer like that?
Well, so you're going to take a law professor, you're going to take a senior lecturer who has been there for 20, 25, 30 years, 10 years, and contributes to what the Faculty of Law is. You're going to take a doctor, a professor in the medical school, there are professors there who have been there for 35 years, for 20 years, for 15 years. And you think you can then just take someone out who's just a recent qualified graduate. And many of these recent qualified graduates are actually graduates of a system that is already deeply flawed, deeply weak. So they themselves, in fact, are already, their own qualifications and experience is already problematic. So you can't. So you then say you replace them overnight. So not only does it compromise the university, so if you take degrees like engineering, medicine, law, all those are degrees in which they are professional regulatory authorities. So for the law, for instance, you have the Council for Legal Education. That will ensure that for you to come out with a law graduate who is fit and proper to practice law, they must have gone through a certain program of learning with a certain level of training. So if you do what they do now, where the Faculty of Law thinks at a complete standby, I think probably just 2 or so lecturers are teaching out of the entire lot, you are compromising the students who are there now. It is quite possible that if you try and push through those students by bringing these new people, the Council for Legal Education has a legal obligation to say, no, these students do not qualify to become lawyers. These students do not qualify to become doctors, to become engineers, to become accountants. So it's a very short-term, short-sighted solution to a deep problem. The Vice-Chancellor likes to say, Mofan Gwakutunga means ajeri. This is exactly the opposite. For those students, for their parents, and us, their teachers, the resolution of this problem is what is required by ensuring that the worker gets their due. So it will be a tragedy for the students, for the nation, if this is allowed to continue.
But is there an opportunity to increase the workers' salary without increasing the fees for the learners?
Well, already, as I've said to you, in 2018, if you take from about 2010 right through up to 2018, lecturers were being paid salaries that were regionally comparable. So if you look at what our lecturers were paid for in this country, it was set at what is called a regional parity level. So they looked at the average salaries of lecturers in the region, and that is where they then set our salaries as slightly below, but comparable. So that way you were able to stop the exodus of lecturers outside the country. It was being paid for by society. It was not being paid for by students. Of course, the fees that students pay help contribute. So what I'm saying to you is we were able to do it for 8 years. And before I joined the university in 1994, for the next 10 years, it was being paid for by the state. If you go to South Africa, state university, in fact, the top universities in Africa, if you take the top 20 universities in Africa, I think about 12 are in South Africa. They are funded by the state, including research funds, not just salaries, because for you to produce a top university, you require also research. So we must get away from the mindset that it is parents or guardians who must pay for university education. Indeed, for education. Education is the ultimate beneficiaries of education are not really the parents. It is society at large, because it is society that requires nurses, that requires doctors. It is society that requires teachers. engineers, carpenters to make this. If you're going to talk of Vision 2030, you are not going to achieve Vision 2030 without a skilled labor force, without a skilled workforce. So it is society that benefits the most from the education of its children. So society must assume the responsibility for sending those children to school.
But what is the society in its sense also doing? Because you go to other universities across the world, you find that the army always contributes back to institutions that made them who they are. And over since 1980, this country has produced professors, it has produced excellent doctors, engineers who are very successful across the world. What are they doing for the university to make it better and so that they look back and say, this is the institution that we...
Yes, I suppose more could be done. And part of an enlightened leadership of the university would also manage and organize university in a way that would encourage our global diaspora to put back into our universities. But when you have the kind of poor management and administration that I've just highlighted, where university management will spend, will buy well over 50 top range cars at the end in 2023, 2024 for its 50 management. I think money that is in excess of almost $1 million if you look at what they're paying. Yet you could use half of that money to give every single lecturer a laptop, every single lecturer a cell phone, and data to do their work. So I'm just talking in terms of what is within their means. But with the $1 million that they get, they would rather use it to fund luxury cars for themselves. So that's not going to inspire, those who want to partner with the university to do so. So it goes back again to what I've said, poor leadership and administration. It's a contribution. But even the top universities, if you look at Ivy League universities in America, what is happening now? If you look at the amounts where Trump is fighting some of the top universities like Harvard and Columbia, and has just held back billions of dollars for Harvard. Now, Harvard has got the biggest endowment. Endowment means money that is put for a university to invest, comes a lot from alumni. So that happens, but Harvard will not be able to run without the billions of dollars that come from the American government, as well as state funding. So ultimately, look, this country has over 62 minerals. This country has lithium. This country has gold. Botswana just has diamond. University education in Botswana is free. Students there, the state pays. The salaries for university lecturers in Botswana are some of the highest in the region, if not in Africa. So we still must not ultimately excuse the state, as well as its administrators and politicians, from their responsibility.
They cry sanctions.
Yes, they cry sanctions, but we do not see sanctions when we see the level of expropriation of resources. I mean, you just saw recently when you talk to elections, I'm looking at this election watch Zec thing here, where tens of millions of dollars just reportedly were just taken by ruling party state-aligned individuals. And financial authorities in South Africa are actually now pursuing this. So you cry sanctions when you deal with issues that affect the masses. You look at recently appointed judges of the High Court. A judge of the High Court is appointed even before they formally assumed their work. Samora Machel is already full of pegged latest cars. They cry sanctions. Just a year and a half year ago, every senior executive of the state, across the breadth of the state, you are talking of commanders of the army, you are talking of judges, you are talking of permanent secretaries. They were all given in excess of $300,000-400,000 US to buy houses. MPs were given $40,000. And then you say there's no money. Of course, sanctions are real. We do not decry sanctions. But what has made the situation worse is that in a situation where sanctions have materially affected the economy of this country. So we do not deny that. That has been made worse by an elite, corrupt, extractive leadership of this country at different levels. Jiganandas. Yeah. So, well, they themselves say so. Isn't it Chiwenga, the VP, who talks about this Ghana? It has become so open and so obvious. So, no, there are real funds, there are real money that is in this country, but it is being taken just by a tiny elite, Shigananda, as you've talked about, as well as their big business and political paymasters.
We've seen that the students have been supporting the lecturers. Are you bribing your students to support you?
Well, we're having a lecture now with you in a real thing. Yeah. No, but I can understand. It is their future that is being played with. It is their future that is at stake. The vast majority of our students come from working class backgrounds. They come from our villages. This is the only opportunity that they have to bring themselves and their families, to escape the grinding poverty and that they come from. So they can understand. They've seen how our students, you are in the law faculty, you've seen how our students contribute towards fuel, towards transport, towards getting resources. We teach in an LT 400 where I'm expected to teach 400-500 students in a lecture theater. You don't even have a PA system. So we've seen our students contribute to try and make things happen. So they do understand that their lecturers have shown commitment and and I think they can also understand that it is necessary to make these sacrifices to ensure that this problem is resolved. You cannot keep on postponing the problem, and this is what has been happening. So we appreciate the support that the students have given, some of them even to the extent of getting arrested for showing support. And we want to assure the students, the strike at the university is actually probably the first lawful strike in this country in the last 22 years. And what that means, so it's both a lawful strike as well as a constitutional strike. So what that means is, for instance, you cannot dismiss the lecturers, like the unlawful act that's about to be done by the university right now of trying to bring in scab labor. At law, you cannot bring in scab labor to replace workers who are on a lawful strike. It's an illegality. But we also went to the High Court, and the High Court affirmed that this is a lawful strike. The members of the union, as well as supporters, that includes students, are protected. They are therefore, at law, are free to come and support the pickets of the workers. We made sure that the picket and the High Court order included them. So we want to appreciate it and ask them, together with the parents and guardians, we want the parents and guardians to understand that this is our struggle together. This is a struggle for preserving a strategic institution for this country.
Amazing. One in one of our lectures, I argued with you when you're talking about halls of residence at the university in NC5 and saying that why don't we celebrate our own heroes and name them after our own heroes? And I said to you, why should we do that when these heroes, when they make money, they don't send it to improve the quality of education? Why should we do that? Alfred Beit-Hall, they've put their money there. Mm-hmm. When we get money, we buy cars.
Uh-huh.
And I think we should send this message out there to say those people who have come out of these universities must come and invest in them so that we build a future for our own. Because it is my child who's going to go to that university after me. It is my child's child. And if we leave, as you say, this corruption, it will hurt our children and not theirs, because they can afford to send their children to the Ivy League. We can't.
No, you're perfectly right. Look, who are our heroes? Of course, the concept of heroes has been distorted, where just the top few people who give themselves roads all over the country and so forth. But certainly Alfred Bates, your Cecil John Rhodes, and others are not our heroes. They were part of a vicious colonial racist system that was designed to ensure that a small, tiny racial elite and a few corporate blacks were at the top. You talked about Gutsa regimes when we started. It is that society that we wanted to break. So it is those heroes, the ordinary people who have fought. You have fostered here Geza, Blessed Geza, and others who have raised these issues about why they went to war and why what they see today is wrong. And today, in the twilight of their lives, in their 70s, they are ready again to sacrifice for a better and a new society. And so if we do this and reflect this journey on our young people today, it is that which will ensure that that aspiration, that dream for an egalitarian and equal society in which every kid has adequate food, adequate education is there. So yes, we cannot name, you build a new lecture theatre, you call it Diamond Lecture Theatre, as if you have no. The whites, when they were running the rest of Zimbabwe, would never call a place a Diamond Lecture Theatre 1. They would celebrate the heroes of their society. People like you are heroes of our society in terms of fighting for press freedom, democracy. We celebrate people like you and many others. So I see that. But at the end of the day, even as we make a call for those who've benefited to be able to come back, when we did university, you would get a loan and then you'd pay afterwards. Those are the kind of things that we can also begin to consider, but taking into account where people are in terms of workers, where villagers are. And I've already referred to you that there has been legalized theft of worker salaries and pensioner salaries for the last 7 years. It's clearly legalized theft, where you change your currency and you, in the end, you end up where a worker is earning 2,500. They are now earning less than $30. So the ordinary people have, in fact, contributed to this society through those kind of resources that were stolen from them. What more contributions you want to make them to make when they've contributed so much with the lives of their families? So the struggle at the university cannot be seen in isolation. It must be seen as part and parcel of the struggle by ordinary workers, by villagers, against the excessive exploitation that they are suffering in our society today. So we hope that it inspires others. I've already referred to it, that it is actually the first lawful strike that has happened in this country in the last 20 years. It took a lot to get there, but ultimately, the constitution of this country guarantees workers the right to a fair and reasonable wage. The constitution also guarantees them the right to strike, just like the constitution guarantees ordinary people the right to protest and to demonstrate. You cannot resolve these issues ultimately without resolving the fundamental political, economic problems of our society.
Miss, I want to thank you very much for joining me on the situation right now. But before I let you go, like I always do, maybe it's not a question that I've asked, but something that sits heavily on your heart. Just under 2 minutes, just address the people of Zimbabwe from your heart.
Thank you, Blessed. To the parents, guardians, mothers, and fathers of Zimbabwe who have shown your support to the lecturers at the University of Zimbabwe, we want to salute and appreciate you, and want you to understand that what we are doing is for the good of your children, for the good of this country. It is ordinary people whom the University of Zimbabwe and universities like MSU, NUST serve. And what we are doing is to ensure that your children are able to get your future. And us, as the workers at the university, are also able to look after our families. And we hope that the university administration, as well as the government, have heard this message. Our students have suffered for long enough. It is now over a month. It is time to get down and sit and address this problem. And that simply means giving the lecturers and other university staff basic, reasonable dues that they are entitled to in terms of the constitution and laws of this country. So we thank you, and we hope that this will come to an end soon.
Amazing. Education is the vaccine of violence. An educated society is developmental in nature and does not desire to fight or fight amongst themselves. In fact, when your child is educated and their mind is open, their desire is to develop society. So we must all be worried. This is not a fight for lecturers. This is not a fight for someone to put money in their pockets. It's a fight to transform the nation. It's a fight to ensure that we, those of us who are in universities, our children who are coming through, get the best possible education so that we deliver the best possible solutions for this nation. Without education, we are a doomed nation. The strike is not for lecturers, it's for everyone, government included, to look into these issues and ensure that they drive this nation to a vision that will all make us go back on the table of nations and be recognized. Now, this is, and this will always be the situation right now. With me, your host as usual, Dara B. Thank you very much for choosing us as your station of choice on Heart and Soul TV and radio. Until next time, please don't forget to subscribe, share, and like so that this reaches as many people as possible. Until next time, I am and will always be Dara B. Thank you.
Thank you, Dara B.